Okay, we're going to get started, so please take a seat. Yeah. Okay. So welcome to the second invited session, so block 4. And the first talk for this session is by Hamutal Kreiner.
So, welcome to this talk. Thank you for inviting me for this special session. And I will talk today about inner speech's language embodiment, and I will present evidence from the modal system of. Can you stand behind the lectern, please? Well, then I can't see. This is part of a larger research that studies inner speech, and the work I present today is the work of this Yael Marcusohn, who's our PhD student who couldn't attend today. One thing I want to say before I start is that the data is quite recent. We have nearly, we're still working on analysis, so it is work in progress, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts, suggestions, comments. I'm sure it will help. So to start, if we go back, linguistics and psycholinguistics have thought about language as abstract representations. However, abstract representation or amodal representations are a challenge to neurolinguistic theory, because the brain, as well as the hearing and speaking systems, are very concrete. So language embodiment theory addressed this challenge by associating experience with neural activity. The experience can be sensory or motor experience, and we know that they show in different studies association between this experience and neural activity. And even in the absence of real activity or real experience, they talk about simulation. So without external stimuli or without external action, there might be a simulation that gives rise to representation according to embodiment theory. Most of the embodiment theory focus on the embodiment of meaning, so associated referential features to activation patterns in the brain. However, we all know that the message is often conveyed not by what you say or what we say, but rather by how we say it. So the sentence structure, the emotion, the things like irony, all these aspects that are part of the form of the message is not less important than the content of the message. So the main question we start with is, how is form embodied? And this is what I've been doing for the last couple of years. And in our paper in 2014, we suggested that prosody has an important role in this, or that prosody can serve as the missing link in the embodiment of form, because first it's an aspect of experience with both sensory and motor aspects, and it conveys many aspects of form, as I mentioned before. So we thought it's a good candidate, and in this paper we detail how it is implemented, the association between prosody and neural activity. Inner speech is a mental imagery. We normally think of visual mental imagery, but we can think of inner speech as an auditory mental imagery. And we know from research back in the previous century about visual imagery that it represents concrete aspects of the stimulus, such as color, shape, size, distance, etc. So we can think about auditory mental imagery in the same in the same vein. So the auditory image, the auditory mental imagery may convey aspects of the acoustic stimulus, like the amplitude or the loudness, the intonation, the rhythm, when we think of inner speech. Based on this, we suggest that inner speech allows representation of prosodic aspects of language that convey different aspects of form. So our starting point is that inner speech is an embodiment of language form, and from this view, we derived two hypotheses that we examined in the following in the work that I'm presenting now. So the first hypothesis was that if inner speech serves as an embodiment, it is manifested in the body somehow, and we focused on the motor system, and as you will see soon, we focused on the manual motor system, so the fingers while typing, and the facial muscles that are around the mouth that are involved when we speak out loud, and the question is to what extent are they involved when we are engaged in inner speech. The second hypothesis was that if inner speech serves as an embodied representation of form as conveyed by prosody, we would expect to see that those aspects of prosody that represent pragmatic variation, sentence structure, emotion, will be manifested in the body manifestation of the inner speech. So to test this, hypothesis, we did this very complex experiment that I will explain step by step. This is me and the student setting it. And basically, in each trial in this experiment, participants first listen to a sentence, then they repeat it silently once, and then at the third step, they have to type it. Okay. During all these steps, we use surface electromyography to record what is called EMG, or changes in the activity of these three muscles around the mouth. So this is the setting of the experiments. What sentences do they hear? They hear sentences that were generated to vary prosody. So the sentences are built as two sets of sentences. In one set, we manipulate the structure. So we have question versus statement sentences. In the other set, we manipulate emotions. So we have positive, neutral, or negative sentences. And in both sets, we manipulate as well the speech manner, or whether it is a direct speech or indirect speech. And we do that, we use this pragmatic manipulation because previous findings have shown that direct speech enhances the simulation or enhances the inner speech. So these are the sentences, and just to wrap up the experiment, we had 40 participants, and they hear 100 sentences, so 40 from one set and 40 from the other, and 20 fillers. In each sentence, they do these three steps, and we record their EMG. What data we use from all this experiment? So from the recorded sentences, we derived some acoustic measures. So the duration of each word within each sentence, and the pitch, the average pitch of each word within each sentence. And we use that as a predictor in some of the analysis. From the typing, we derived two measures as well. One is the inter-key interval, which is the interval between one key press and the next. And the other one is the pressure. Both are averaged per word. The pressure of the keystroke. And from all stages, we have the EMG signal. And then we start looking at the associations between these different measures. And in each analysis, we focus on one question. So the first question, and of course we have the manipulated variables, the speech manner, the sentence structures, and the emotion. So the first question we asked is whether we can predict the typing patterns from prosodic aspect of speech, of the spoken, the recorded sentences. So basically we look at these acoustic variables, and we use them and the manipulated prosodic variables to predict first the interkey interval and then the pressure. And we use linear mixed effects to predict the interkey interval. And we see that the word duration, with its interaction with word number, so the serial position of the word in the sentence, and in interaction with speech manner, are significant predictors of interkey interval. And I will show a figure that just to demonstrate what it really means, this association. And you can see here the similarity between the acoustic duration, or the word duration in the red lines, and the interkey interval in the blue lines. Now, I will not go into so many details in the following analysis, because there are a lot of data and a lot of analysis, but this is just to demonstrate. I will give a summary of the other analysis, but they are based on the same rationale. So to sum up this analysis, when we predicted the interkey interval, we found that word duration, with its interaction with word order, speech manner, and emotion, were significant predictors of the typing tempo, or the interkey interval. And the next analysis checked what happens when we predict the pressure, the typing pressure. And here we see that the average pitch of the word, with its interaction with the word order, the speech manner and emotion are significant predictors of the pressure on the keystroke. Now, what do we learn from this? So basically, we have here two things that happen at different points of time, and they're still associated. And so we think that there must be an internal representation. Our hypothesis is that this is inner speech that mediates between these events. So with this thought, we go to the next analysis, and here we ask, can we predict the facial muscle activity, the EMG signal, during the inner speech, when participants don't seem to be doing anything, but they are speaking silently. So can we predict the muscle activity from the prosodic aspect of the spoken sentences? So now we predict EMG from the acoustic measures and from the sentence structure, emotion, and speech manner. And just to sum up the results, we see association between the EMG signal in this second stage of the trial, and the speech manner, the sentence emotion, and the sentence structure, and to some extent with the pitch. The pitch didn't come up significant in all three muscles, so it's less clear that it's a strong and significant predictor. We don't see the duration as a predictor, and we think that this is because for the speech we have a very clear segmentation per words for the recorded sentences, whereas for the inner speech we have a continuous EMG signal, and we don't know how to segment it, so the durations do not correlate. We're still thinking of sophisticated things, how to try and align them. So this is still a work in progress there. But these findings are still consistent with our first thought that there is some internal representation that mediates between this, and the fact that the facial motor activity is also predicted by the speech manner, emotion, etc., the prosodic factors, is consistent with that idea. So in the third analysis, we try to ask, can we predict the facial muscle activity and figure motoric during the third stage of the trial from the second stage, from the stage where they're only engaged in inner speech. And what we see here is an association between the inner speech EMG, so the EMG signal during the second stage and the EMG signal during the third stage, suggesting that whatever it is that they're doing, it's quite similar in the second when we see nothing, and in the third when it accompanies the typing. And we also see an association between typing pressure and the EMG signal of the third stage of the trial, and the speech manner, the sentence emotion, and the sentence structure. So altogether, this converges into support of our hypothesis that there is an internal representation that mediates it. So to summarize the finding, I think we can say that we show an association between events that occur at different points of time, and this suggests that they are mediated by internal representation. We also show association between the speech acoustics and motor activity, the facial motor activity and the typing patterns. And this suggests that this internal representation is speech related. And finally, the contribution of speech manner, sentence structure, and emotion to the prediction suggests that prosody is part of this internal representation. So these are the findings. What are the implications? I think we show and we join a large body of research that show that the embodiment is not occurring only in the brain, but linguistic embodiment is manifested in the body as well, in the motor system. We show that embodiment goes beyond referential features, beyond semantics, and that there is a linguistic embodiment of form. And our work on this aspect is quite new, because there isn't much research about the embodiment of form. Our next questions are related to the function of inner speech. Does the inner speech or inner voice mediate the understanding of form? So we have the next experiment testing whether using inner speech facilitates the understanding of sentence structure, sentence emotion, and pragmatic intentions. And with these thoughts, I will thank you for listening, leave you with your inner voices, and I'm happy for questions, suggestions, comments.
Okay, we have some time for questions from Zoom and from people here. Then I start. Could you say a bit more at the end? You hinted about how inner speech might facilitate. Yeah, how at the end you hinted at you were planning to look at how inner speech might facilitate the parsing or comprehension of structure. I didn't get that. What do you mean?
Program for the next experiment?
Yeah.
Right, well, we're still working on it, but some experiments are already designed. So
Microphone.
if we use manipulations such as disturbing inner speech in different ways, we're checking what are the best ways to disturb inner speech, whether it will affect your comprehension of the, for example, irony. If you read or if you say a sentence that has irony in it, but you are disturbed, you can't use your inner speech, then will you understand to the same extent the irony or the emotion? If I think of like an everyday example, if I have to engage in some conversation, like I don't know, job interview or some something with my superiors at work, I sometimes imagine I hear my inner voice. I have all this, and I hope I'm not the only one that's doing it. So I use my inner voice to simulate it, and it helps me prepare. Okay. Now, sometimes this is my my intuition now, and not the results of experiments, but we will experiment it. Sometimes I feel that during this simulation, my voice is raised, and I say to myself, "Uh-oh." So I understand that my emotion is not balanced, and that I should be in more control. So I kind of understand my emotion through my prosody. So that's what we're going to check. But as I said, we're just thinking about it now and trying to do, just to see what's the best way to check it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. This is a really interesting talk with fascinating results. It reminded me of this, the classic earlier work by Yael et al. In 2011, where they did similar manipulations with direct versus indirect speech, and they did some fMRI measures. And as far as I remember, their conclusion was that the main difference was in acoustic regions of the brain involved in listening. And that especially reminded me of, well, the fact that most implicit prosody work seems to focus on the experience of hearing the contours that we're projecting as we read, rather than of producing them. And so I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the relationship between audition versus production in terms of embodiment of these kinds of representations.
So first, thank you for mentioning Yael and Schippers and Berlin. We are the fact that we included it is because I know the work, and this was the reason to include the direct speech manipulation. As we were interested in the motor system, so production was the issue and not audition. I think we use inner voices in different ways. Sometimes we're more, and there might be individual differences or contextual differences in the context in which we are more focused on hearing the voices or on producing them. I think both exist. I think if you think about the introspection, you can distinguish between them. You can describe your experience. Was it auditory or production? But I think both existed. So I'm not sure I know how to answer this question. I just in this work, because we were interested in the motor system, we asked participants particularly to produce in their inner speech, not just to imagine hearing.
Cool, thank you.
I guess maybe a very similar question. This sort of reminded me of the debates between proponents of motor theory and direct realism versus people who think that we have yoked acoustic, well, perceptual and motor representations for speech. So, I mean, given that you believe that it's both, I'm just wondering why you're expecting then motor activation during understanding, or like what would be the role of this kind of motor activation in language understanding.
So the question is why we expect it in comprehension. Right. Yeah. So one of the reasons is that the I don't know if you know the production, that the prediction by production view, Pickering and Garrod, Gambi and Pickering as well. So they actually say that comprehension and prediction, which is part of comprehension, is based on production. If this is correct, then we would expect some simulation to occur when we comprehend. And this leads me to saying that we didn't finish the analysis, but one thing that we will look at to that may be a better answer to your question is, what do we see in the EMG while they're just listening? Because we didn't analyze that, but we have this data, and then we'll have a better answer for your question.
Thanks.
You can use the microphone.
Thank you. I was curious, I think you mentioned this in passing, and maybe I missed it, but about the differences between positive and negative emotion. Because I think in some of the measures you found effects of positive and not
Yeah, the positive didn't come up in all. The negative was more consistent, showing up in more of the analysis. I think this is not new in psychology. Negative emotions are always kind of stronger and manifested easier. Yeah, but we did the analysis always comparing the emotion to the neutral. So the neutral was a baseline. We didn't have a direct comparison of positive, negative. And the negative is really robust in showing up more than the positive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, then thanks a lot for the talk.